I met my dad like 3 times in my life. And he would come in, hang out with my mom, give us some money and tell us to go get ice cream or whatever. And so I don't really remember much of him. But I remember being 4 or 5. I don't really remember 4 or 5, but somewhere around there. I remember going to grandma's house all the time. We would go there for every holiday. We'd go there a couple times a week. And my grandma lived in this cute little house on the corner of town of Middleton, Michigan. And it was my grandma, my grandpa, and my Uncle Mike that lived in this house. And we would go there all the time. And me and my brother would play in the yard. And my Uncle Mike was so cool, right? He was 19, 20 years old. I don't really know exactly what he was, but he always used to build like these model cars. And I distinctly recall the A-Team van from the show The A-Team. And I was mesmerized by the guy, right? He had this golden Thunderbird or T-Bird Firebird car that was just sweet. He had like the car phone in it when it first came out. And I was just enamored with the guy. And we would go there on holidays. All the family would come. There's cousins, there's aunts, there's uncles. And I just remember it being a pretty happy environment. And when I was 5 years old, that's when I first found out he had an Atari in his up in his room. And his room was upstairs. And I went up there one day and I was just mesmerized by this little video game. I'm like, this is dope. And there was a pole position was the game. And I remember playing it when I was 5, and then that's when he started to molest me. I was there playing the video game, and I remember him sitting me down on his lap. And that's when the molestation started. And of course, it came in with the threats of, don't say anything. This is our little secret. If you say anything, everybody's going to get hurt. I'll have to hurt the whole family. And I don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. And so I zoned out whenever I would go up to his room. And I mean, this is happening a couple times. Every time we go over there now, after the first time, it's happening. And I would go up and I would just zone out in the video game, and I'm not paying any attention to what's actually happening. I'm just kind of blocking it out. I know something's not right, but at the same time, I'm this scared 5-year-old boy. I don't want anybody to get hurt or get into trouble. And for some reason, it became this thing. Not long after that, my mother's boyfriend, Daryl Hall, started to molest me. And not long after that, a family friend named Tim Klinger. I don't have a problem calling these assholes out by name. Tim Klinger started to molest me when we would go over to his house. And all of a sudden, I found myself from the age of 5 and onward, I'm getting molested like 2, 3, 4 times a week, nonstop. And as a kid, I don't understand what's going on. I mean, I'm not really cognizant of what's happening. But when I was 7 years old, and this is now constant in my life, my brother and I were at a baseball field that was right behind our house connected to the high school. And we saw a bunch of kids at a Catholic school, and they were having a little party or whatever it was, and we weren't allowed to go because we weren't Catholics. And when it was over, we broke into the church. We went around the church to the backside in the basement windows, and we tried to open the window and it broke. And so we went inside and we grabbed up some playing cards and some pudding cups and some other stuff and took our stuff and went across back to the dugout, and we were in there eating the pudding and playing with the cards, and all of a sudden the cop rolled up. And I remember he put us in handcuffs and drove us back to our house. And that was the first time I got arrested. I was 7 years old. It was 1988. And looking back, I believe that they arrested us and charged us because my mother was like this big anti-government, anti-police protester in our small little town. And it just made no sense to me why now, looking back, why you charge a 7-year-old with a felony, but they charged me with larceny, breaking and entering with intent to commit larceny from a building. And I got 60 days probation. It's the first time I ever saw Judge Skinner, the Honorable Judge Skinner in Montcalm County, Michigan. And he gave me 60 days probation. And, the ass whooping from mom, the grounding, the probation, all of a sudden, nobody was around. Like, Daryl left, Tim wouldn't come around, we couldn't go to grandma's house, or we didn't go to grandma's house, or for whatever reason, I wasn't getting molested. And when I got off probation, all of a sudden it's like the doors opened up and everybody just came back, and I started getting molested again. And so I went out and I think I stole like a 3-wheel bike from somebody in a trailer park, and I broke it. But I got arrested again and charged again with destruction of property and larceny, and put back on probation. And when I got put back on probation, the guys went away. And so I found this little system of when I would get into trouble, I'd catch an ass whooping from mom, I would get grounded or whatever, I would go to the courts, all the attention was on me, and you're on probation, but all the dudes went away. And so I kept doing it. And it was like every 3 months I'm back in the courtroom. And the judge is constantly like, next time, young man, next time, young man. And this was the pattern for probably the next 3 years until I turned 10. And when I was 10, I don't even recall why it happened, but something bad happened, and I just broke down and told my mom about my uncle, that he was molesting me. And that's when everything went to shit. Everything fell apart. We didn't go to grandma's house anymore. We would go over there, but just not with anybody else. My uncle was arrested, ultimately was sent to prison, and it just became, I realized now how fucked up my family was, right? Like, we would go over on holidays, we'd go the next day. The rest of the family came over, and they blamed me. They said it was my fault, that I was lying, or that I somehow made this stuff up, and I got our Uncle Mike put in prison. And one of the craziest parts is that while we would go over to the holidays, and when you read my book, Hey White Boy, Conversations of Redemption, there's a lot of things that I missed, because after the book went to press, I was laying in bed with my wife, and I called my mother. And I talked to her, and she had said, well, you only put 4 guys in that book. What about this guy? And what about this guy? And my wife's jaw hit the floor like, are you kidding me? I had blocked out like 2 other guys that had molested me as a kid. Like, I completely forgot about it, didn't put it in the book. And then she tells me, well, you also said in there that your Uncle Mike started molesting you at 5. He actually started to molest you when you were 3. And we found out about it. And her mom and dad, my grandparents, swept it under the rug, got him mental health counseling, and you were not allowed to go upstairs anymore. And I haven't really talked to my mother since then, but why would I even go back to the house? Why would you take your kid back to that house? And then I look back at it and I'm thinking, how do you allow this to happen to your child, where 6 dudes are just constantly molesting me my whole fucking life? And so when he went to prison and then the whole family fell apart and there was no more of that, we would go over there after the holidays, and this guy would call the house and they would put me on the phone with him to talk to my Uncle Mike while he's in prison, and it's the holidays. I'm like a 10, 11-year-old kid, and you're putting me on the phone with this guy to ask him how he's doing, to hear how he's doing, and he's telling me he's sorry, and he's like, fuck you, man. And it was so traumatically for me, because now I'm like, I have this sexual propensity at 11 years old and 12 years old. Like, I'm looking at porn, and I'm just this distraught kid. And I was so inverted because of all the damage that was done to me. I had no self-confidence. I was constantly bullied in school. Like, I was that target. I was that kid in school that had long, greasy hair, smelly, dirty clothes, because I tried to put a ward around me so people would leave me alone.
Did you have a dad?
No. My mom had boyfriends in and out. The closest thing I had to a dad was a guy named Al Bauer. Closest thing that I had to a dad. But it was just, my life was shit, man. Like, going to school was horrible. Out of school was horrible. And I was just this really reclusive kid, and music was my savior. My mom used to have this really badass tape box. And I would listen to and it was just an eclectic collection of music, and music was my escape. So I would like hide in the closet and just listen to music. But I kept getting into trouble. And even after my uncle went to prison, there was still, I told on Tim probably when I was 11 and a half. Daryl just kind of disappeared out of the frame. But these other guys, they were still there. And I don't even really recollect much of it. That's like the trauma of that just kind of vanished, I guess. But I kept getting into trouble. That was one thing that stayed consistent. I was assaulting people, which didn't make much sense to me because I was not the tough kid. I would steal all the time. Like I was a little kleptomaniac. I walk into the store, I'm stealing something. I break into stuff all the time. And when I was 12 years old, my brother and I stole my mother's car. We wanted to get away from life so bad that we decided we were going to steal my mother's car and we were going to go to Chicago. And so we stole my mom's Escort, and we made it out of the state. We got arrested in Hodgkins, Illinois at like 5 a.m. And that was the last time I saw my brother until I was 21. They took my brother away. They sent him to juvie, and I didn't see him. And my brother was my whole world, right? My brother was a tough kid. You know, he had a good reputation in town, and he was kind of my protector. If anybody messed with me, he'd kick their ass. And I worshiped my brother. And he went away, and it was just me and my mom. And then my mom started just going through boyfriend after boyfriend, and I started getting into drugs and alcohol. I started to drink. I started to smoke weed. I started to have sex. And that's really where 12, 13, my life started to expand into these things where I started to distance myself from my mother. And I kept getting into trouble. I stayed on probation, but the judge was always, next time. And he never took me away, just probation. And when I was 15, a friend of mine, Tim, and I were walking outside of Carson City in the middle of the night, and we broke into a house, looted some stuff and took some bikes out of the yard and rode the bikes into Carson City, the town. We went through the hospital parking lot, stole some stuff out of vehicles, and we got caught by the cops, and they arrested us and charged us with stolen bicycles, having stolen cell phones, B&Es. And this was the time the judge said, you know what, I'm done with you. I'm going to bind you over to adult court. And my first time going into adult court, the judge he said, you know what, I'm not even going to play with you. You have a horrible record. You're done. And he sent me to prison. And I remember sitting there at sentencing. I thought I was just going to get probation again. And my mom was in the courtroom, and I was there with my lawyer, and 24 to 48 months or 60 months in the Michigan Department of Corrections. And I didn't even know what that meant. Right? And I look at my lawyer. I'm like, what is that? And he said, he just sent you to prison. I'm like prison? He's like, yeah. And I went back to the county jail, and my mom came to visit. And in that visit, she says, I'm leaving state with my boyfriend, Ed. You're going to have to go kind of walk this path and figure this out. And that's the last time I talked to my father. I called my father from the county jail. I don't even remember how I had his number, but I called him and said, Dad, they're sending me to prison. And he said, good luck. Don't gamble, don't borrow. And that was it. And that's when I really started to walk a path all by myself. And it was rough. I stayed in the county jail for about 6 months waiting transfer. And in February of 1998, they sent me to Riverside, which is the quarantine for Michigan. And I remember going in there for the first time. It was so fucking scary, right? Like there's these long hallways and all these gangsters and just, it was just the most terrifying thing in the world. And I was scared shitless, man. I had long hair. I was 170 pounds, skinny white kid. And I was just like, oh my God. And the doors opened up for chow. When they ran chow lines, the doors would open every 5 minutes during chow. So you could go out, go to chow, come back. And I remember I was probably 5 days in, 6 days in. My bunkie jumps down, he goes out. And I thought I'd catch the next door. I'm down the doors open up, and I stand up, and 2 dudes come running in, and he's got this big, nasty knife, and he grabbed me by the neck, stuck it in my neck, and he said, "You know what this is, man? You fight, you scream, you die." And for the next 15 minutes, they savagely raped the shit out of me, man. And I know that it was 15 minutes because the door opened and closed 3 times. And I that's what I remember in that moment was I was on the bunk and I had this bar in my throat. And it was like, I'm like, dude, I can't fucking do anything because I can't breathe. And they had this knife in my face and they're just going to town. And I just remember the door. And I've been so traumatized in my life that I was kind of able to just zone out, right? And go back to my Uncle Mike when I'm playing the video game and just zone out. And then next thing you know, they're gone. And I remember laying there on the bed thinking, I can't do this. Like this is going to be my life if I don't do something. And I sat up, I cleaned myself off, and I'm crying, I'm in pain, and I look up, and I got a bunch of little pencils that are on the desk, and I grabbed them up, and I took my shoestring off, and I tied it around the shoestring, and when the door opened again, they were over by their door. Well, one of them was, and I walked across the hall, and I was just really calm, nonchalant, like, "Hey, man, I just want you to know that I'm not going to say anything." And I remember him looking at me like, "Fuck you." And I started to stab the shit out of this guy in the face with these pens. I lost it. And he fell down, and And I ran back into the cell. I undid the pencils and washed my hands in the sink, washed all the pencils off, put them back, quickly put my shoe thing, and you could hear the police coming. Here comes the keys jingling, and my adrenaline's pumping. I'm fucking shaking, and I'm like, fuck. And they came and they got this guy up. And the damage wasn't that significant. It's just little pencils, right? But there was a lot of blood. And they cart him off down the hall, and then I hear the other guy screaming, CO, you gotta come get me. You gotta come get me. He's gonna get me too. And then you see them grab him out of the cell, and he goes walking by. And I got up on the bunk, and I just laid there. I'm like, fuck, this is it, man. Like, I'm gonna get charged with something. Like, my adrenaline's just going crazy. And they never came. They never came back. And I don't know why they didn't come back. I guess nobody told. Nobody said anything. And I remember the next morning, the doors opened up for breakfast. I laid there all night just thinking about, it was just crazy. And the doors opened up for breakfast, and I went out, and you could feel something different in the air, right? There was something palpable in the, like the looks were fear and respect. Nobody saw what those 2 had done to me during chow. They just saw me come out and do that. And I even got some hand daps, and I'm like, in my mind, I knew this is what I have to do to survive. Like, if I'm going to make it through this is what I'm going to have to be. And the next couple weeks went relatively quiet. I went through all the processes, but then we got put on the bus and transferred out to the actual facility after quarantine. And the guy that was in the seat with me is this Mexican cat named Lalo. And he was like, "Bro, what you did in there was solid, man. Like, we're going to be bunkies," because they got a sheet that tells you who you're going to be bunkies. We're going to be bunkies, man. And I'm just glad I got a solid ass cat to be a bunkie with. And when we get to the new facility, he's telling me all about the gang that he's in. And I had no experiences with gangs whatsoever. I'm from the country. And I thought, man, I need that. So how do I get in? How do I do that? And he said, you're a solid ass cat. Don't worry, I got you. I'm going to introduce you to our boss, to the leader. So we went out to the yard, and he introduced me to the guy. And the guy said, I heard you were down as hell. And if you want in, you got to put in some work. And here's a knife. There's the opposite side. Go put in some work. And I didn't even hesitate. And I'm like this really soft, kind, quiet kid, right? I don't like pain. I don't like people hurting. It hurts me to see that. But at this point, like, I'm just numb. And I went over and I stabbed this guy. And that's what I became. I got inundated into the gang life. And in a few short months, I cut the hair off and got a fade, started to get a bunch of tattoos, and I started to embody the role. I knew, as scared as I was inside, I can't show that. I have to be this really mean, vicious, and tough dude if I'm going to survive this shit. And the next 2 years at Thumb Correctional Facility were filled with violence and learning gang literature and gang signs and handshakes and politics and fights all the time. And then they opened up this new facility, the first ever youth facility, privatized youth facility by a company called Whack and Hut. And it was in Baldwin, Michigan.